another episode of a book review journey, the growth ritual. I'll be reviewing the book The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith in this episode, and I'm just going to be very brief and quick. Now, you need to know that this book was written in the 18th century, published in 1776, and it took about 10 years to write this book. If you go to the previous episode, we did a breakdown on the chapters, volumes, parts. Very exhaustive. This book is a lot, more than 1,000 pages, right? So, to continue from where we stopped previously, I'm just going to display my screen, and we are going to be doing some little research together while we read this book, basically. So I'm just going to leave my web browser open and displayed while I explain the introduction. Alright, so in the introduction, you need to understand that the introduction was written by Mark G. Spencer from Brook University. And one thing about the introduction is that it was easy to understand, unlike the book itself. So let's just do a quick search of who Mark G. Spencer was. Right, he was a Canadian historian, of course. That means he was good in history. He gave a brief introduction. So I'm just going to continue from the introduction, some interesting part and some interesting things I discovered here. So, according to Mark, Adam Smith has some manuscripts he never published, and that he instructed his interns to trash immediately he dies. Of course, he wrote here the project was never finished, and Smith directed his literary executors, that means of course those he called literary executors, Black and Hutton, to burn some 22 volumes of manuscript after his death, which they did. So that means there was some wisdom from Adam Smith that is not public till date. There was some wisdom from Adam Smith that never got published, because he instructed his interns or his executors to ensure he doesn't publish it. Of course, he also stated that it's worth noting that he never got married. Of course, just like what I've said earlier, there were some interesting facts in the introduction. He also talked about how he took 10 years, that is, Adam Smith took 10 years before he could fully publish this book. Let's just do a quick search on that. We'll see how many years did it take Adam Smith to write Wealth of Nations. How long did it take him to write Wealth of Nations? We see that it took him about 10 years to write. Yeah, so he just talked about that in the introduction also, and then he mentioned some contributors. He mentioned some persons that Adam Smith had to reach out to while writing the book. He mentioned some persons he had to share the wisdom with, of course, the plan and all. So that was all about the introduction by Mark G. Spencer. And then he spoke about how most of his friends started mentioning that they were already seeing his books across Europe, they were already seeing his books everywhere. And then we moved to the introduction, which was the plan of the work. So Adam Smith has the plan of the work, his own introduction of his book, which is the plan of the work. And in the plan of the work embodies what he's just going to talk about. And this is where some complexities come to play. That is why I take out time to try to want to decode the 18th century English, because they use a lot of long phrases and dense phrases and some long sentences. They do not really have brackets and use columns the way we use it, semicolons the way we use it today. It is very different, right? So it takes proper attention to detail and sometimes deep study to first understand how these writers wrote before interpreting their writing. So of course, the plan of the work, he mentioned the annual labor of every nation is the fund which originally supplies it with all necessary and convenience of life. Yeah, he talked about skills, he talked about labor, he talked about those that are skillful, of course, using the word dexterity. He talks about how a nation is going to prosper by the number of people working there, by the division of labor, and then not by the division of labor, also by skills. So he talks about skills. So he just mentioned how, of course, how the book is going to flow is basically going to talk about nations. It's basically going to talk about how skill is distributed. It's basically going to talk about how labor is distributed. And then he will now he talked about that in the first book, which was the plan of the work. He mentioned it that the plan of the work is going to first talk about that. And then he mentioned that in the second book, he treats nature of capital stock, basically. He talked about politics, he talked about economy. So the first book is what is more interesting, which is the book 1. And the book 1 says of the cause of improvement in the products of power and labor. Of course, if you just do a quick Google search as I did here on how to decode Adam Smith's book, it says Adam Smith did not use the mechanical cipher or decoding pattern. Instead, the 18th century writing style uses deductive prose. Of course, when one of the secrets to also reading Adam Smith's literature is to read it aloud, which I found which I found helpful. So when reading this book initially, I was very frustrated at first and felt like giving up on reading it. But however, I did some research and discovered that while reading it, if you read it aloud, you are going to understand it better, right? So now the chapter 1, which is of the division of labor, I'm just going to display the division of labor alone on the screen to ignore distraction. So in the division of labor, just quickly what it talks about is just the fact that if one man keep doing one thing, right? If one person is doing one thing and 20 persons are doing the same thing, 20 persons is going to achieve more, right? And then he now talked about the fact of specialization, right? If you have specialties, he gave several examples of people he have seen whereby 20 boys alone or 7 boys alone delivers thousands of needles. He used needles and some of the technology of their days. He used smiths, right? Some of the technology of their days, goldsmiths and all of that, blacksmiths, used it to describe the division of labor. And here is the thing that he tried to describe, right? He said that if one person keep doing one thing, of course, you will not achieve the results of 20 persons. And of course, then he now talked about even within those 20 persons, within those 20 people, there is what we call skill and specialty. So let's say that you have one person want to paint a house, right? That one person that want to paint the house will get the paint, we wash the house, we lay the foundation, start painting, and then clean up. But if you have 3 persons wanting to paint a house, and then they are specialized on one skill. So within that 3 persons, there's one person alone that is specialized on cleaning the house. There's another person that is specialized on painting the house, and then the 3rd person that is specialized on doing the finishing. That 3 persons will do well. However, there is now dexterity. Their consistency will now bet skill. So that person that is always cleaning the house, over time will now master it and now get an easier way to do it. Why? Because it's focused, because there's what we call specialization. So Adam Smith talked about specialization. Then in that chapter, I now gave several illustrations about countries, France, Europe, and all of that, those days, that had skilled workers that were specialized on something and were producing the best results. That is all for today. This is one of the most difficult books I've ever challenged myself to read. And then we'll see ourselves in the next chapter. Like I said, this is The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. We are just 5 pages into the book from the chapter 1. Of course, we are done with the introduction that was done by Mark, and with the introduction, which is the plan of the work. We are going to meet in the next episode, still reviewing this interesting book, The Wealth of Nations. I myself am trying to take it gradually till I grasp the real message of this book. Thank you so much for joining in. See you in the next episode.